Are you struggling with reading or listening in English? Do you ever feel like giving up? This is the true-to-life story of a boy who had every reason to quit, but he didn't. The boy who never gave up is not just a story. It's your daily dose of motivation and your English learning practice. Watch until the end, because this story might just change your life. The boy who couldn't read. Once in a small village lived a boy named Arman. He was 10 years old and lived with his parents and younger sister. Arman was like most kids his age, curious, playful, and full of dreams. But there was one problem. He couldn't read properly. Every time he opened a book, the letters danced in front of his eyes. The words didn't make sense. In class, when the teacher asked him to read out loud, Arman froze. His heart would beat fast, his hands would shake, and his face would turn red. The other kids laughed at him. Arman can't even read a simple sentence, they said. It hurt. But Arman never told anyone how he felt. He just smiled and sat quietly in the back of the class. At home, his mother noticed something was wrong. Arman didn't want to do homework. He avoided reading anything, books, signs, even messages on the TV screen. One day, his mother sat next to him and said, "Arman, why don't you read with me?" He looked down and said, "I don't like reading." But the truth was, he was afraid of reading. His mother didn't get angry. She just said, "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to try." Those words stayed with Arman. That night, he thought about them. Maybe he didn't have to be the best. Maybe he just needed to start. The next morning, Arman woke up early. He picked up a small storybook that his sister had. The title was The Fox and the Grapes. He looked at the first page. It was hard. He read one word, then stopped. Then another. It took him 20 minutes to read the first page. But he didn't stop. And when he finished, he smiled to himself. "I read it," he whispered. "I actually read it." From that day, Arman made a plan. He would read one page every day, no matter how long it took. But school was still hard. His teacher, Miss Sana, was kind but busy. She had 30 students in the class. She didn't notice that Arman was trying his best. During reading lessons, Arman still felt nervous. The kids still laughed. Sometimes he wanted to give up. One afternoon, after a rough day at school, he sat on a bench near the playground, tears in his eyes. Just then, an old man walked by and sat next to him. "Why are you sad, young man?" the old man asked. Arman wiped his tears and said, "I'm not good at reading. Everyone laughs at me." The man looked at him and said, "Do you know how I learned to read?" Arman looked up. "No, sir. I was 50 years old when I read my first book," the man said. Arman's eyes grew wide. "Really?" "Yes. I grew up working in the fields. I didn't go to school. But I never gave up. I read one word a day. Then one sentence. Then one page. And now, I've read more than 500 books." Arman was amazed. The man continued, "It doesn't matter where you start. What matters is that you keep going." That day, Arman found new hope. At home, he picked a different book, a children's English dictionary. He learned a new word every day. Hope, strong, learn, listen. He even began listening to audio stories online. At first, the speakers talked too fast. But Arman listened again and again until the words began to make sense. One evening, his father brought home a surprise, a second-hand tablet. "This is for you and your sister," he said. "You can use it to learn." Arman was so excited. He searched for English reading and listening apps. He found one where stories were told slowly, with subtitles. Every night before bed, he would read along with the voice. Some nights, he still struggled. Some words were too hard. Sometimes he got tired. But then he remembered the old man. One word. One sentence. One page. Months passed. Arman's reading got better. His listening got sharper. In class, he raised his hand to read. The other kids were surprised. "Wow! Arman read the whole page," one girl said. Miss Sana smiled. "I'm proud of you, Arman." It was the first time anyone said that to him in school. But the journey wasn't over. There were still challenges ahead. One day, the school announced a reading competition. The best reader from each class would go to the district level. Arman's heart beat fast when he heard the news. Could he do it? Could the boy who once couldn't read a single line stand on a stage and read in front of hundreds of people? The reading competition. The reading competition was just 2 weeks away. Arman had never joined a competition before. He was both excited and scared. He knew this was his chance to show everyone how much he had improved. But deep down, a small voice still whispered, "What if you fail?" At home that evening, Arman told his parents about the competition. His mother hugged him and said, "You've already come so far. Just keep doing your best." His father nodded and added, "It's not about winning. It's about trying." Arman smiled. He knew they were right. He had worked so hard to get here, and he wasn't going to stop now. The next day, Miss Sanaa gave the students a passage to practice for the first round. It was a short story about a young eagle learning to fly. The story had difficult words like determination, freedom, and confidence. Arman took the story home and read it aloud again and again. At first, he stumbled over the big words, but he used his tablet to hear how those words were spoken. He repeated them slowly, one by one. "Determination," he said out loud, trying to copy the pronunciation. After a few days, he could read the whole passage clearly. He practiced in front of the mirror. He practiced in front of his sister. He even recorded himself and listened to how he sounded. Every day, he got a little better. Then came the first round. The whole class gathered in the library. One by one, each student went up and read a story aloud. Arman sat quietly, waiting for his turn. His hands were sweating. His heart was beating fast. Finally, Miss Sanaa called his name. "Arman, it's your turn." He stood up and walked to the front of the room. He held the paper in his hands and looked at the words. For a moment, everything around him felt quiet. He took a deep breath, and he began to read. His voice was soft at first, but it grew stronger with each sentence. He read with feeling. He didn't just read the words, he told the story. When he finished, there was a short silence. Then the room filled with claps. Miss Sanaa smiled. "Well done, Arman." He had passed the first round. After class, some of the students came up to him. "You read really well," one of the boys said. Another girl added, "I didn't know you could read like that." Arman felt proud. But he also knew this was just the beginning. The next round was the district-level competition. There would be students from many schools. And they would all be good. For the next week, Arman prepared like never before. He chose a story called The Brave Little Ant. It was about a small ant who helped his entire colony during a storm. Arman liked the story because it reminded him of himself, a small boy with a big heart. He worked on every sentence. He practiced his tone, his pauses, his pronunciation. He even practiced smiling while reading. His mother helped him with difficult words. His sister listened and clapped every time he finished. Then the big day arrived. The district competition was held in a large hall in the city. It was the first time Arman had been to such a place. The room was filled with students, teachers, and judges. When he saw the stage, his stomach turned. It looked so big. He had never spoken into a microphone before. The announcer called out names one by one. Arman waited backstage, holding his story tightly in his hands. He looked at the other students. Some looked confident, others nervous like him. Then he heard it. Next up, from Green Valley School, Arman Ahmed. He walked slowly to the stage. The lights were bright. The microphone stood in front of him. He could hear his heartbeat in his ears. He looked at the judges, then at the audience. He remembered what the old man in the park had told him. It doesn't matter where you start. What matters is that you keep going. He took a deep breath and started reading. This time, his voice was clear from the beginning. He read with emotion. He gave life to the characters in the story. When he reached the last line, he looked up and smiled. There was silence for a moment, then loud applause. Backstage, his teacher hugged him. "You did amazing, Arman. I'm so proud of you." He didn't know yet if he had won. But in his heart, he felt like a winner already. Later that day, the results were announced. Arman didn't win first place. But he came second, beating students from much bigger schools. When his name was called, he walked up and received a silver medal. His parents clapped proudly from the crowd. His sister jumped up and down with joy. Even students from other schools came and congratulated him. That night, Arman sat on his bed, holding the medal in his hand. It wasn't just a medal. It was a symbol of everything he had worked for. He thought back to the time he couldn't read a single line. He remembered the kids laughing at him. He remembered the fear, the tears, the old man's words, and all those nights practicing one word at a time. He smiled and whispered to himself, "I didn't give up." But deep in his heart, he knew something else. This was not the end. This was only the beginning of something even bigger. Winning second place in the district reading competition was a turning point in Arman's life. For the first time, he believed in himself. He wasn't just the boy who couldn't read anymore. He was the boy who had worked hard, stood on stage, and made people listen. At school, things began to change. His classmates looked at him differently. They no longer laughed at him when he read. Some of them even asked him for help with difficult words. His teacher, Miss Sanaa, gave him more chances to read aloud in class and encouraged him to keep improving. Arman started spending more time in the school library. He discovered adventure stories, animal stories, and even some simple books in English and Urdu side by side. He read slowly, underlining the words he didn't know. Then he'd look them up in his dictionary or listen to how they were pronounced on his tablet. But just when things were starting to go well, something unexpected happened. One day, Arman's father came home with sad news. "I lost my job today," he said softly. Arman's heart sank. His father worked as a cleaner at a factory, and his income helped support the family. Without that job, things would be difficult. Over the next few weeks, life changed at home. There were fewer meals with meat. Sometimes, the electricity was cut off because they couldn't pay the bill on time. His mother started stitching clothes for extra money, and his father looked for work every day. Arman could feel the pressure. He didn't say anything, but he knew his parents were stressed. One night, he heard them talking. "Maybe we should stop sending Arman to school for now," his father said. "Just for a while, until I find work." "No," his mother replied firmly. "He's come so far. We can't take that away from him." Arman lay awake all night. He didn't want to leave school. Reading had become his passion, and listening to stories helped him escape from the worries at home. The next morning, he made a decision. He would help his family in whatever way he could. After school, instead of playing with friends, he began helping his mother sew buttons on clothes. On weekends, he delivered grocery bags for a nearby shopkeeper and earned a small amount of money. It wasn't much, but every rupee counted. Despite all this, he didn't stop reading. He found ways to keep learning. He read by candlelight when there was no electricity. He listened to English podcasts while doing chores. He borrowed books from friends when he couldn't afford his own. One day, his teacher announced that there would be an inter-school storytelling contest. The students had to write their own short story and read it aloud in front of an audience. Arman's eyes lit up. This was different. It wasn't just about reading. It was about creating his own story. He wanted to join, but he hesitated. He didn't have a proper notebook or even a pen that worked well. That evening, he told his mother about the contest. She smiled and said, "If your heart wants it, then go for it." She reached into her old sewing box and pulled out 20 rupees. "This is for a new notebook," she said. Arman hugged her tightly. He promised himself that he would not waste this chance. That night, he sat down and began writing. His story was about a small bird with a broken wing. All the other birds told him he would never fly. But the bird didn't listen. Day by day, he flapped his wing, tried to lift off, and kept falling. Until one day, with the wind behind him and courage in his heart, he finally flew. The story was simple, but it came straight from Arman's heart. It was his story in another form. He practiced reading it out loud every night. He made sure each word was clear. He worked on his expressions and timing. He even recorded himself and listened carefully for mistakes. When the day of the contest arrived, Arman walked into the hall with confidence. He wore a clean shirt and held his handwritten story like a treasure. There were many students from different schools. Some had printed scripts, flashy clothes, and fancy introductions. Arman had none of that, but he had something more powerful, his truth. When it was his turn, he walked to the stage, took a deep breath, and began. His voice was steady. He read with emotion. Every word carried meaning. When he reached the part where the bird finally flew, he paused, looked at the audience, and said, "The bird didn't give up. And neither should we." There was silence in the room. Then the applause came, louder than he had ever heard. After the event, one of the judges walked up to him and said, "That was beautiful. You didn't just tell a story. You inspired everyone in this room." Arman didn't win first place, but he received a special mention for most inspiring story. The judge gave him a book as a gift and wrote on the first page, "To Arman, the boy who never gave up." That night, Arman walked home with the book in his hand and tears in his eyes. Not tears of sadness, but tears of joy. Even when life got harder, even when everything seemed to go wrong, he had kept reading, listening, and believing. He knew now that he wasn't alone. His words had touched others. And that meant something. But life still had more lessons to teach him. Because real strength doesn't come just from reading words. It comes from living them. After the storytelling contest, something changed in Arman. He didn't just love reading now, he wanted to write more. The little story about the bird had touched people's hearts, and that gave him a new dream. He wanted to become a writer. It felt strange to say it out loud. He was just a boy from a poor family, still learning how to read and speak fluently. Writers were people with big degrees and lots of books, right? But Arman didn't care. He had a notebook, a pen, and a heart full of stories. That was enough to start. Every night, after finishing homework and helping his mother, Arman would open his notebook and write. Sometimes he wrote about animals, sometimes about children like him, and sometimes about his own life, though he changed the names and places. He wrote slowly, carefully, and with feeling. His English wasn't perfect, and he often had to check words or ask his teacher. But that didn't stop him. Mistakes are part of learning, he would say to himself. At school, Miss Sana noticed his new passion. One day, she called him after class. "Arman," she said, "would you like to join the school's reading and writing club?" Arman's eyes widened. "There's a club." "Yes," she smiled. "We meet once a week after school. We share stories, read books, and help each other improve." Arman nodded quickly. "Yes, I'd love to join." From the first meeting, Arman knew he had found the right place. The club wasn't big, just 10 students, but they all loved reading and writing. Some wrote poems, some wrote essays, and some wrote funny stories. They read each other's work, gave feedback, and even acted out parts of stories. Arman felt nervous at first, but when he read his story about a lonely tree who wanted to be someone's friend, the room went quiet. When he finished, everyone clapped. One of the older students, Zara, said, "That was beautiful. You have a gift, Arman." He smiled shyly. No one had ever said that to him before. But even as things were going well at school, life at home was still difficult. His father still hadn't found a stable job. His mother worked late into the night. Arman could see the tiredness in their faces. Sometimes he felt guilty spending time writing stories when his family was struggling. One day, he came home and saw his father sitting on the steps looking down. "Everything all right, Abba?" Arman asked. His father sighed. "I went to 5 places today. No one's hiring. They say I'm too old or not skilled enough." Arman sat beside him. He didn't know what to say. He wished he could do something more. That evening, Arman remembered a post he had seen on the school notice board. A local newspaper was running a writing contest for young students. The winner would get a small cash prize and their story published in the newspaper. A crazy thought entered his mind. What if he tried? He didn't tell anyone at first. He worked on the story in secret. He wanted it to be special. He wrote about a boy named Sammy who lived in a village and wanted to help his father. Sammy had a dream of doing something big, even though everyone told him it was impossible. In the story, Sammy used his talent to bring joy to others and eventually changed his life. It took Arman a full week to finish the story. He rewrote it 3 times, checked the grammar, and even asked Miss Sana to help him polish it. "This is very good," she said. "I'll help you send it in." A month passed. Arman almost forgot about the contest. He had gone back to his routine, studying, helping at home, and writing in his notebook. Then one morning, something amazing happened. As Arman walked into school, his classmates ran up to him, shouting, "Arman, you're in the newspaper." He didn't understand at first. Then Miss Sana came with a folded newspaper in her hand. She opened it to the middle page and pointed. There it was, his story, his name, his words, in print, and below it in bold letters, "First place winner." Arman stood frozen for a moment. It didn't feel real. Miss Sana smiled. "Congratulations. You've made all of us proud." The school principal came to shake his hand. His classmates clapped and cheered. Arman couldn't stop smiling. But the best moment came later that evening when he showed the newspaper to his parents. His mother covered her mouth in surprise. "Arman, you wrote this?" He nodded and she hugged him tightly. His father read the story slowly, line by line. When he finished, there were tears in his eyes. "I've never been more proud," he said. "You've done something I never could." The prize money wasn't much, but Arman gave it all to his parents. "It's for the house," he said. "For you." His father shook his head. "No, son. This is your future. We'll save it for your studies." From that day, something shifted in the house. There was still struggle, but there was also hope. Arman's success reminded them that dreams were worth chasing, even in the hardest times. He was invited to read his story at a local event. He stood on stage, holding a microphone, looking at people who had never met him before. He told them about the boy named Sammy, and about not giving up. He read slowly, with confidence. When he finished, a woman in the crowd stood up and said, "That story made me cry." "Thank you." Arman realized then that words had power. Real power. They could heal, inspire, and connect people. That night, as he sat in bed with his notebook, he wrote just one sentence. This is only the beginning. Arman's story being published in the newspaper changed his life in more ways than he expected. It was no longer just about reading and writing. It was about sharing stories, feelings, and strength. One afternoon after school, the principal called Arman to his office. Arman felt nervous, wondering if he had done something wrong. But when he walked in, the principal smiled warmly. "Arman, we've been watching your progress. It's inspiring," he said. "We want you to help younger students who are struggling with reading. Will you do it?" Arman blinked in surprise. "You want me to teach?" "Not teach exactly," the principal said. "Just read with them. Help them like you helped yourself. Some of them need someone who understands how hard it is." Arman nodded slowly. He remembered how it felt to be the boy sitting alone, afraid to read out loud, worried about being laughed at. If he could help just one student feel braver, it would be worth it. So, every Tuesday and Thursday after school, Arman stayed behind to meet with a small group of students from class 1 and 2. He read stories with them, simple tales with big pictures and easy words. He made funny voices for the characters and asked them questions like, "What do you think happens next?" At first, the children were shy. Some hid their faces. Some said, "I can't read." But Arman didn't push them. He just said, "Try one word." That's how I started. Little by little, they opened up. There was a boy named Faison who always looked angry. But after a few sessions, Faison smiled while reading about a monkey who lost his banana. There was a girl named Saba who whispered her words so softly that Arman had to lean in to hear. One day, she read an entire page in a loud, clear voice. Each small success felt like a big victory to Arman. One evening, Arman stayed behind longer than usual. As he packed up his books, Miss Sana came in. "You're doing something beautiful," she said. Arman smiled. "They remind me of myself." Miss Sana sat beside him. "Do you know, Arman, there are children all over the country who are struggling to learn. But most don't have someone to guide them. One day, you could help even more students, maybe through your writing." Arman had never thought about that. He looked down at his notebook and said, "Maybe one day." At home, Arman continued to write. His father had found a part-time job in another town, and his mother was still sewing clothes. Life wasn't easy, but things were more stable now. Arman had his own space by the window, where he kept his books and notebooks stacked neatly. One night, his sister Amina came to him and said, "Bye, will you write a story for me?" Arman smiled. "About what?" "About a princess," she said, "but not a weak one. A strong princess." So he wrote the story of Princess Layla, who didn't wait for a prince to save her. She used her brain, her bravery, and her voice to help her people. Amina loved it and told her friends about it at school. Soon, other kids started asking Arman, "Can you write a story for us too?" Arman realized something. Children liked stories, but they didn't always have someone to write them in a simple, fun way they could understand. That gave him a new idea. One weekend, he borrowed his friend's old laptop and typed up 5 short stories he had written in his notebook. He added drawings made by his sister and saved them all in a folder. Then, with help from Miss Sana and the school's computer teacher, he created a small digital storybook. Nothing fancy, just a collection of stories in simple English with pictures and audio recordings of Arman reading them. They shared the storybook in school. Soon, students started reading it during break time. Some even took the audio home on USB drives to listen with their families. The reaction was bigger than Arman had imagined. The school decided to print a few copies. They put Arman's name on the cover. Stories by Arman Ahmed, the boy who never gave up. People from other schools began asking for copies. A teacher from a nearby school invited Arman to speak to her class. Then another. Every time Arman stood in front of students and read his stories, he told them his own journey. "I couldn't read until I was 10, he would say. "I was scared. People laughed. But I didn't stop. You shouldn't stop either." He didn't speak like a great public speaker. His English still had small mistakes. His voice sometimes shook. But his story was real. And real stories have power. Soon, a local NGO that worked with underprivileged students heard about Arman. They reached out and offered him a small monthly honorarium to help them create simple reading materials for kids. It wasn't a big job, but for Arman, it meant something even greater. He was turning his struggle into a mission. One evening, while working on a new story about a curious dog and a shy cat, Arman paused. He looked at the wall above his desk, where he had pinned a copy of his first newspaper story, his silver medal, and a photo of the old man he once met on the bench near the playground. He remembered the man's words. One word. One sentence. One page. He whispered them now like a prayer. Arman wasn't rich. He wasn't famous. But he had something far more powerful than money or fame. He had a story that was still being written, one page at a time. And this story, his story, had already changed lives. Years passed. Arman was no longer the quiet boy who once sat in the back of the classroom, afraid to read aloud. He had become a confident young man, full of ideas and purpose. But he never forgot where he came from, and he never stopped trying to help others. By the time he turned 17, Arman had written over 50 stories for children. His digital storybook was being used in schools across his district. Some of his stories were even translated into Urdu and other local languages to reach more children. He had also started a YouTube channel with help from his school's media teacher. It wasn't a fancy channel, just him reading stories in a calm voice, using simple English, with subtitles and pictures to help young learners understand. Within a few months, the channel began to grow. People from other countries started watching, leaving comments like, "I'm learning English from your stories. Thank you. My son listens to your story every night before bed. I was going to quit learning English, but your videos gave me hope." Each message made Arman feel proud, but also humble. He never saw himself as a hero or a genius. He was just a boy who had refused to give up. One day, he got an email from a big education platform. They wanted to partner with him to create a reading series for children in South Asia. They loved how simple and emotional his storytelling was. They believed his style could reach thousands of learners. Arman couldn't believe it. He showed the email to Miss Sana, who had always been like a second mother to him. "You deserve this," she said, wiping a tear from her eye. "You worked for it." But even as big opportunities came, Arman remained focused on his community. He continued visiting small schools, reading to students, and encouraging them. He especially looked for children who sat quietly like he once did, afraid, unsure, but full of potential. One day, during a visit to a village school, he noticed a young boy sitting alone in the back. The boy had messy hair, torn shoes, and a notebook filled with scribbles. After the session, Arman walked over and sat beside him. "Hi, I'm Arman. What's your name?" The boy looked down and whispered, "Tariq. Do you like stories, Tariq?" "I like them, but I can't read well," he said sadly. "Everyone laughs when I try." Arman smiled. "I used to feel the same." The boy looked up, surprised. "You?" Arman nodded. "Want to know a secret? The first page I ever read took me 20 minutes. And I cried after reading it, not because I was sad, but because I finally did it." Tariq smiled a little. Arman handed him a small book. "Try this one. Read one sentence a day. Don't worry about mistakes. Just keep going." That moment reminded Arman of everything he had learned over the years. That reading was not just about books, it was about believing. About trying again and again until something clicks. That night, Arman returned home and opened his old box. Inside were his first notebook, his first silver medal, the photo of the old man on the bench, and the 20-rupee note his mother had once given him to buy his first notebook. He sat quietly, remembering every step of the journey. The fear, the laughter from classmates, the small victories, the candlelit nights, the writing contest, the little children learning from his stories. And now a global platform wanting to work with him. He whispered to himself, "You never gave up. And look how far you came." Months later, Arman was invited to give a short speech at a national education conference. He stood on a stage that was 10 times bigger than the one from his first reading competition. The room was filled with teachers, students, and education leaders from all over the country. As he stood at the microphone, he looked out at the audience. "I want to tell you a story," he began, "about a boy who was once laughed at because he couldn't read. A boy who was scared to speak, who failed over and over again. But he didn't give up. He read one word a day. Then one sentence. Then one page." He paused. "That boy was me." The audience was silent. "And I'm standing here today not because I was the smartest, not because I was the fastest, but because I was willing to try one more time." He ended with a message that had become his life's motto. If you're struggling to read or learn, don't be ashamed. Be proud that you're trying. Because every great journey starts with a small, brave step. The crowd stood and clapped. Some had tears in their eyes. After the event, Arman walked out of the hall and stood under the sky. The stars were shining. The night was peaceful. He thought about all the people who had helped him along the way. His parents, his sister, Miss Sanaa, the old man on the bench, and the little children who now looked up to him. He smiled, because he knew this wasn't the end of his story. It was just the beginning of many more stories. Stories that he would write, stories he would share, and stories that would help children believe in themselves. He pulled out his notebook and wrote, "The boy who never gave up became the man who helped others rise."